Here is something nobody really prepares you for while you are growing up. The second someone disrespects you, they are not actually saying anything about who you are. They are running an experiment. They are flipping a switch to see what happens. They are testing whether your self-worth has a price tag, whether your dignity can be bargained away, whether staying quiet is something they can count on from you, and the majority of people do stay quiet. Most people swallow the disrespect, tuck it somewhere deep inside, and talk themselves into believing that responding would only make them look worse. So they smile through it. They brush it off with a laugh. They crack a self-deprecating joke to release the tension in the room. And in doing so, they pass the test, just not the one that matters. Because when you allow disrespect to go unchecked, you are not taking the high road. You are giving it your approval. You are communicating to every single person in that room, including yourself, that this behavior is welcome, that you are open to it, that anyone else who wants to try their luck is free to do so. What follows is about breaking that pattern, not through rage, not through theatrics, but through something far more disciplined and effective than either. Think back to the last time someone said something to you that stung. Maybe it came wrapped in humor. Maybe it was a comment made at work in front of an audience. Maybe it was a compliment that carried a hidden knife, delivered with a full smile. Or maybe it was blunt and impossible to misread, a flat-out rejection of something you said or contributed. What was your reaction? If you are being real with yourself, you probably did one of three things. You pretended it did not happen and moved on. You reacted emotionally and later felt like that made you look worse than they did. Or you replayed the scene in your head for the next 3 days, crafting all the perfect responses you never actually said. None of those reactions restore what was taken from you. And here is the reason why. Most people operate under the belief that answering disrespect is about winning a debate. They think the objective is to say the sharpest thing, deliver the best comeback, or prove to everyone watching that they are smarter or tougher than the person who came at them. But that is entirely the wrong game to play. The objective is not to win the moment. The objective is to win the dynamic, and those are two completely different battles. Winning the moment means you had the last word tonight. Winning the dynamic means that 3 months from now, that person and every witness still knows exactly where your boundary is and exactly what crossing it costs. That is the destination we are moving toward. The most unexpected thing you can do when someone disrespects you is go completely quiet. Not passive, quiet. There is a world of difference between the two. Passive is when you shrink into yourself. Quiet is when you become absolutely still. And stillness, applied at the right moment, is one of the most deeply unsettling things a human being can project onto another. Here is the reason it works. When someone disrespects you, they are anticipating a reaction. That anticipation is actually what fuels the disrespect in the first place. They want the laugh. They want to watch you flinch. They want you to get defensive, to over-explain, to chuckle awkwardly because the alternative feels too uncomfortable. That reaction is their payoff. It confirms the move landed. When you go quiet instead, you take away the reward entirely. You leave the disrespect suspended in the air with no place to land. And that silence, that cold, intentional pause, begins to communicate everything without a single word being spoken. It says, "I clocked that. I am not scrambling to fix the mood. I am not here to rescue you from the awkwardness you just created. I am watching, and I am deciding what comes next." Most people cannot sit inside that kind of stillness. They will rush to fill the void. They will over-explain the joke. They will walk it back. They will suddenly have somewhere else to be. Because when your stillness gives them no cover, their own actions begin to reflect back at them uncomfortably. Now here is what you must understand about that silence. It is not a permanent position. It is a setup. It is the moment you reclaim emotional control from their hands and place it firmly back in yours. And from that position, your next move comes from a place of clarity rather than heat. Once you have gone still, there is one move that consistently reshapes the entire energy of the room, without raising your voice, without losing your composure, without saying a single thing you will later regret. You reflect the moment back at them through a question. Not an accusation, not a rebuttal. A calm, deliberate question that invites them to examine what they just did in front of everyone. Something like, "Did you mean that the way it came out?" Or, "Want to say that again so the whole room catches it?" Or simply, "That felt pretty pointed. Was that on purpose?" Each of those questions does something specific. They are not attacks, but they force the other person to make a real-time decision. Either double down on the disrespect, now out in the open, now undeniable, now impossible to dress up, or start walking it back. And most people, when suddenly placed under a spotlight rather than the shadow they were counting on, will backpedal fast. Because here is the truth about most people who disrespect others. They are not brave. They are opportunistic. They picked a moment when the odds felt in their favor. They chose a setting where the social cost of crossing you seemed low, and when you calmly flip that calculation, when you make the cost suddenly feel very real, their confidence evaporates almost instantly. You are not being aggressive, you are being surgical, and surgical precision delivered without emotion is one of the most formidable social tools available to anyone. Everything depends on your tone. You are not firing these questions like accusations. You are asking them the way a surgeon asks someone to hold steady. Calm, direct, completely unshakable. That tone tells everyone in the room what they need to know. You are not rattled. You are not surprised. And you are handling this the same way you would handle any minor inconvenience, because that is genuinely all it is to you. That framing alone rewrites how people read you. Here is where most people fall short. Even when they start strong, handle the moment well, go quiet, ask the question, hold their poise, earn the room, watch the person retreat. They let everything slip 20 minutes later. The conversation picks back up, the atmosphere lightens, and the person who disrespected them gets the signal that there are no real lasting consequences, that the door has swung back open, that a reset button exists and is fully operational. Do not make that mistake. The moment someone disrespects you, the relationship changes. Not dramatically, not with a formal declaration, but it changes. And the way you carry yourself after that moment is how you communicate that change. In practice, it looks like this. You become less accessible, not hostile, not cold, just noticeably less warm. The spontaneous exchange you might have had with that person does not happen. The invitation you would have extended is not offered. The energy you once brought to your interactions with them quietly gets invested elsewhere. They will notice, and when they do, they will understand something without you ever having to say it. That what happened carried weight, that there was a price attached, that you are not the kind of person who signals that something matters and then behaves as though it did not. This is not pettiness. This is consistency. And consistency is the only thing that separates a real standard from a hollow performance. Anyone can have one strong moment. The people who earn genuine respect are the ones whose response to disrespect is not just a single strong reaction. It is a lasting shift in how the relationship operates, because that is what proves the boundary is real. Let us be straightforward about something. Everything we have covered is harder to execute than it sounds. Not because the approach is complicated, it is not, but because most of us were conditioned with ideas about conflict that directly undermine everything in this message. We were taught to be the bigger person. We were told that responding hands the other person power. We were told the best answer to disrespect is to rise above it, to deny it energy, to let it wash off. And part of that thinking contains real wisdom, the part that warns you against emotional explosions, against reckless escalation, against letting someone else's low behavior drag you down to their floor. But another part of that thinking is genuinely destructive, the part that tells you your discomfort is irrelevant, that holding a standard makes you a problem, that the socially acceptable move is to absorb the blow and carry on, because making someone uncomfortable is worse than being disrespected yourself. That version of thinking will quietly erode your self-respect over time. And it will cost you something else too. The respect of everyone watching, because people do not admire limitless tolerance. They read it as weakness. They observe how you handle these moments, and they construct a mental image of what your standards genuinely are. And if that image shows someone who never enforces anything, they file you into a category, even if they never speak it aloud. The good news is that none of this is permanent. You do not need to become hard, aggressive, or domineering. You simply need to build one skill that most people never even practice: the ability to care more about your own standards than about someone else's comfort in the moment. That is the whole shift. That is everything. And once you make it, the way people engage with you begins to transform. Now, let us talk about what happens when someone does not take the lesson the first time. Because some people will push again, not in the same obvious way. They are not careless. They will return with something subtler, a comment dressed as a compliment, a joke carrying just enough deniability to claim they were kidding, a quiet omission, a small exclusion, something with enough cover to let them test whether your first response was a real pattern or a one-time performance. This is the second test, and it matters even more than the first. If you meet the second test the same way you met the first, with that same controlled stillness, that same quiet refusal to play along, you pass. The message lands. The pattern is established. But if your energy softens again, if you ease the standard because things felt uncomfortable, and you wanted to smooth things over, you have just told them the first response was theater, that it came at a cost you were not actually prepared to sustain. This is where the concept of disproportionate consequence becomes important. Not proportionate, disproportionate. Here is what that means. If someone disrespects you once and you address it, that is an even exchange. One violation, one response, balanced terms. But if someone disrespects you, you address it, and they return to test you again, the equation changes entirely. Because now it is no longer about a single lapse in judgment. It is about whether they actually respect you or whether they are going to keep probing until they find the version of you that gives in. And the only answer to that question, the only one that actually works, is making the second response noticeably colder than the first. Not louder, colder. You reduce access even further. The warmth that was already dialed back gets dialed back again. The engagement that was already pulled in gets pulled in even more. You are not punishing out of spite. You are teaching them the actual math. Every failed test costs more than the one before it, and that arithmetic eventually makes the testing not worth pursuing. They either receive the message and stop, or they do not, and they begin to discover that your world simply has less and less room for them. We have spent a lot of time on how to respond. Now let us talk about how to think, because the most significant shift you can make is not tactical, it is perceptual, and it comes down to this. Disrespect is not really about you, it is data about them. When someone takes a shot at you, when they undermine you, mock you, or dismiss you, they are not exposing a truth about your worth. They are exposing something about their own internal landscape, their insecurity, their hunger for dominance, their discomfort with your presence, their unease with what you represent. People who are genuinely grounded do not need to make others feel smaller. People who are truly comfortable in their own skin do not spend time testing other people's limits. The behavior itself is the signal. Think about the people in your life you genuinely admire, the ones who carry themselves with real authority and ease. Do those people routinely take cheap shots at others? Do they mock people for a laugh? Do they constantly poke for reactions? Of course not, because they have no need to. Their sense of self does not depend on reducing someone else. So the next time someone disrespects you, instead of interrogating what it reveals about you, ask what it reveals about them. What is so threatening about you that they felt compelled to take that swing? What is so fragile about their self-image that they needed to challenge yours? That reframe does not mean you ignore the behavior. You still address it. You still hold the boundary, but you do it from a place of clarity instead of hurt. And that difference between responding from clarity and responding from pain is everything. When you respond from pain, you confirm their assumption. You show them they found something real. When you respond from clarity, you are simply correcting an error. Clean, efficient, no unnecessary drama attached. That is the posture that causes people to genuinely recalibrate around you. Here is the long game, and this is where everything compounds. Every time you handle disrespect correctly, with stillness, with precision, with consistent follow-through, you are making a deposit, not just in that one person's perception of you, but in the entire room's perception of you, in the unspoken social record that everyone around you is quietly maintaining whether they know it or not. And over time, that record builds into something that begins working for you automatically. A reputation, not a reputation for being difficult or someone to dodge, a reputation for being someone whose standards are genuine and whose energy is not available to be mishandled. When that reputation exists, something remarkable happens. You stop having to enforce the standard as frequently because people begin doing it for you. They self-correct before you have to say a word. They choose their words more carefully in your presence. They think twice before testing you because they already know what happens when someone does. That is not fear. That is respect. And there is a meaningful distinction between the two. Fear is about what you might do. Respect is about what they already know you will do. And that certainty, that people understand exactly where you stand, is one of the most powerful social assets a person can develop. You do not develop it by announcing it. You do not build it by listing what you will not accept. You build it by showing people consistently that your standards are not situational, that they do not dissolve when it is convenient. that they do not disappear when holding them might create friction. That is the foundation of a reputation that does not crack under pressure. And once it exists, the energy in every room you walk into begins operating differently. Now for the final piece, the one most people never reach because it demands everything that came before it. At some point, after you have enforced the standard and held the distance, someone will come back. Maybe they will apologize. Maybe they will try to joke their way back to how things were. Maybe they will just start behaving differently and quietly hope you notice. This is your moment of maximum leverage, and the way you handle it will define more about how people see you than almost anything else. The instinct most people feel in that moment is the urge to forgive and restore everything to normal. They are worn down by the distance. They do not want to hold on to the tension. They convince themselves that being gracious and welcoming the person back is the mature response. And here is the trap buried in that thinking. The way you close a conflict teaches people the cost of starting one. If someone disrespects you and the penalty amounts to 2 weeks of cooler energy before everything resets, they have learned that the cost is manageable, that they can afford to try again down the road because the reset will eventually come. But if you receive their return without restoring the warmth, if you acknowledge their effort with composure and then simply remain in the new normal you have built, they experience something entirely different. They experience the understanding that access, once lost, is not automatically recovered. That closeness is something earned, not assumed. That the version of you that existed before the disrespect is no longer a guaranteed feature of the relationship. That is not cruelty. That is one of the most powerful lessons you can offer someone about what your respect is actually worth. You do not have to stay cold indefinitely. You do not have to hold it over them forever, but you allow the new reality to settle. You let them understand, without a speech, without an explanation, that the old dynamic is gone. And the one that exists now is simply how things are. And when they accept that, when they stop reaching for what they lost and begin operating under the new terms, you have accomplished something uncommon. You have converted a moment of disrespect into a permanent shift in how that person treats you. Not because you demanded it, not because you threatened it, but because you demonstrated quietly and completely that your standards are non-negotiable and your dignity does not come with a return policy. Everything we have covered traces back to one thing, not tactics, not strategy, not social maneuvering. It traces back to the relationship you carry with your own self-respect. Because the real reason most people struggle to respond to disrespect correctly is not that they lack knowledge of what to do. It is that they do not genuinely believe, deep down, that their standards are worth the friction of enforcing them. They fear being labeled difficult. They fear conflict. They fear that holding the line will leave them isolated. But what becomes undeniable over time is this. The people who respect you most are not the ones you bent yourself to accommodate. They are the ones who came up against your standard, felt it, and respected it. Real connection is not built on infinite tolerance. It is built on mutual respect. And mutual respect requires that both people in a relationship carry real standards, not walls, not coldness, and standards. When you enforce yours, you are not driving people away. You are filtering. You are creating space for the people who will treat you with the regard you have earned, and you are making clear to those who will not that your world is not the place for them. That is not a bitter or harsh way to move through life. It is actually a liberating one. Because when your self-respect becomes truly non-negotiable, you stop burning energy managing people who deplete you. You stop replaying conversations late at night. You stop wondering what you should have said. You handle it, you move forward, and you keep building. So the next time someone disrespects you, and someone will, remember this. Go still, not passive, still. Ask the question, calmly and precisely. Redraw the line not with words, but with how you live going forward. Let the consequence be disproportionate because the lesson has to be lasting. See the behavior for what it tells you about them, not about you. And then keep building the kind of presence that renders the entire conversation unnecessary in the first place. Because the goal was never to punish anyone. The goal was always to become someone whose standard is so clear, so consistent, and so real that most people simply never try. That is the kind of respect that does not need to be demanded, defended, or explained. It is simply understood. And once you reach that point, you will realize you never had to fight for it at all.